Hello guys, Panzermeister36 here. Today's video is going to be your yearly model rating video. Yeah, I only seem to do these videos once every September. Sorry about that, but anyways, today we're going to be looking at how I weathered this hopper car. This is an HO scale hopper car, and I wanted to represent a common modern hopper because we see these all the time now. It's just gray, been repatched for a leasing company. It's got some rust and some tags on the sides. They're all kind of the same now, but we can still make them interesting. So today I'm going to show you how I added the graffiti, interesting rust streaking, some basic weathering, and also how I made it look just kind of interesting with some repatched areas and repainted and replaced parts. So hope you enjoy. Here's how the car looked to begin with. As you can see, I've already removed the couplers and the trucks, and I'm going to start by masking off some areas that I want to look freshly repainted. So to begin, I'm actually going to take some masking tape and kind of mask off some of the markings here. I want it to look like it's been patched. Now, I know that Milwaukee Road isn't exactly a modern leasing company, but I don't have any decals that I can use to repaint this for like Anderson's Leasing or First Union Rail, as we usually see nowadays. So this is going to have to just do for now and kind of represent that. As you can see, I patched over the side markings and also the ones on the end, at least making it look like there's going to be a repaint there. And also on the roof, I've masked off some of the walkway panels and also one of the actual roof hatches here. Since the roof hatch is very not flat, I actually use masking fluid instead of tape to mask it off. But these masked areas are going to look more fresh when we're finished the weathering process. To begin the painting process, I have mixed up a light gray out of mostly black and white with a hint of brown. These are the colors there, and as you can see, it's basically just a little bit darker and maybe a little bit more brown than the color that is already painted on the rail car when you get it. I've thinned this paint down about 80% with lacquer thinner. Generally I would thin a paint 60%, but that would give me a much more opaque coverage. I want this to be a thin tint, so I'm going to thin it about 80% so it's a much more thin, misty coat. My goal here is to make the car look a little bit dirty and also to fade the markings. I also picked a different color than the original gray because you can fade by just painting the original color back over it. I picked a different color because I want those masked areas to look like a different color as if they've been repainted. Now I'm going to take this medium brown color. It's a little bit of a grayish brown, and I've thinned it about 60%. I'm going to airbrush on some, as we'd call, I think, road grime, to simulate just dirt and stuff being kicked up in the lower areas. I'm also going to use this to paint the vertical streaks you see at the end here, and that's due to the wheels kicking up basically vertical lines along the end of the car. I also gave the trucks a quick pass with this to make them look a little bit dirty as well. Alright, now for a rusty brown color. This is called NATO brown, but it's nice reddish brown. I'm going to paint the wheels with this because they're usually very rusty looking. I also painted the couplers, and I'm also going to do a little bit of preliminary, I guess we could call it rusting or whatever, on the roof walkways. I'm just going to kind of like make a thin, squiggly, we call it marbling effect along these, just to kind of make some variation that we can work on later for rust. Alright, now time to remove the masks to see our kind of repainted markings, but in actuality we didn't paint them. But you can see the result here that I'm going for. You can also see how the roof walkway panels that I masked look very fresh, as does this access hatch on the roof. Now I quickly took some black paint and repainted the end markings here, which are very small, because to match what we did on the side, where the reporting mark is freshly repainted, it should be the same here as well, not faded like the rest of the numbers. So here is our car after we've done the weathering process with just the airbrush, and it actually doesn't look that bad right now, but we can greatly improve this with some more effects later on. Still, I think we've got some nice effects on here. It looks faded, looks dirty, we've got rust in the right spots. You can actually just leave it like this if you want to on your own model. Alright, now I'm going to give the model a wash. I have a modeling fancy wash here. This is a product by enamel. It's an enamel medium brown wash. You can always make your own wash by thinning down oil paints or whatever, but we call these convenience products because it's much more convenient to just take it right from the bottle. I'm going to use the wash to accentuate details. So you don't really notice these little, I don't know, details here on the roof until I hit them with the wash, because it's all kind of just the same color. But the wash will collect in the crevices, and since it's a darker color, it will create fake shadows, and those make the model look larger than life by making the details pop out. It also just adds a nice kind of overall grimy, dirty look, simulating stuff that's caught up in the corners like rust, dirt, grime, really anything. That's why for pretty much any subject, a dark brown looks good, because it looks like a shadow and also looks like dirty areas. You're never going to do this perfectly. There's always going to be a couple areas where the wash flows out from the crevices over the flat areas of the model. We don't want it there, so I just take a little bit of thinner on my brush, enamel thinner, and I just gently wipe them away. Alright, now here's the model after we apply the wash, and you can see how suddenly it looks a lot better than it did before. I didn't apply a varnish beforehand because I don't need to. The model is pretty durable, and you can see how suddenly all the details pop out. We got nice like combination of fake shadows and also kind of like road grime and stuff caught up all over the sides. It could even be rust, you know, it's just dark brown. It looks like anything, but it looks good. Now I'm going to work with an oil paint to make some rust effects. This is a fancy modeling oil paint. It's a MIG ammo oil brusher of the rust color, but you don't need to worry about using a fancy modeling oil paint. You can get away with using artist oil paints as well. For example, this oil paint right here would be almost equally as good. It would just take longer to dry because it's an artist oil paint. Again, I'm using enamel thinner to work with this, so I'm mixing the oil paint with a little bit of enamel thinner, and I'm going to make it kind of like a thick wash that I can apply on areas where I want some rust. So I'm going to start on these roof walkways. Remember before when we did some marbling with the airbrush with that rusty paint? Well, I'm going to just kind of modify that now and add more to it. The marbling adds some generic variation, but I can be more precise now by applying some of this rusty oil paint in specific areas to add more precise variation. So I can pick out like distinct edges between individual walkway panels to make the edges more defined, and it'll just kind of make them seem a little bit more interesting. If your whole model looks kind of the same color, has the same effects over the entire thing, it can be boring. So by going in and adding more precise variation like this, you know, picking out some special spots for extra rust, it adds some interest, it adds some focal points. It can take some time if you want to go crazy, but I'll only probably spend half an hour adding these rusty spots here on the walkways. So in areas where I have a lot of rust on the roof walkways, I kind of decided that I want to streak it down the sides to add some interesting rust streaks on the sides. So areas that would be especially heavy, like maybe where that panel was replaced because it might have completely rusted away, I'm now going to bring the oil paint down the sides. Now this looks kind of bad right now, and it is, but we're going to work on it with some thinner and slowly blend it out. Since I'm using oil paints, and oil paints have a long drying time, that's measured more like in hours, I can work as fast as I want here, and I don't worry about this drying permanently in place. If I was using acrylics, this would be drying very quickly and it would probably look just like that. But since it's oil paints, I can keep working at it and keep wiping away the stuff I don't like and narrowing out these streaks and moving them around because I have so much time before this fully sets. Also, I can rub this enamel thinner over the model and it won't damage the acrylic base paints because acrylic paints aren't thinned by enamel thinner, they're thinned by acrylic thinner. So I don't worry about rubbing this thinner over the model because it's not going to damage the base effects. It's only going to move around oil paints. So as you can see, I'm just applying spots of rust, and then I can take another brush. This is like my big soft one you can see I change to every once in a while right here, and I use that to make some vertical streaking motions up and down, and that helps to blend out the streaks and make them kind of look more faded and natural. Again, using oil paints for this effect is very, very useful because you have a longer working time, and you're not gonna, well, you're really not gonna end up with effects you don't like because you have hours to decide if you like them or not, and you can go back and change them if you don't like them. So if you're gonna do some streaking effects, I would really recommend using oil paints for it, not acrylic paints. Now I did a quick effect here where I took some hull red paint to simulate red primer, and I repainted a couple of the parts of the end cage. This was just a quick thing I did because I found some reference photos of old hoppers where I guess these things had rusted pretty heavily, and so they replaced a couple sections of the end cages here. So I did that briefly just to add some interest. And now here's our car with the completed rust effects and also the red primer. And I think it looks really good. It reminds me a lot of how I see modern hopper cars that have lived a long life. I've been repainted a couple times, you know, and they're not looking that great, but they're very interesting. The streaking has also helped to blend out our repainted markings here. And also the roof walkways are looking a lot better now. It looks really cool having all these rust spots and variation on there. I'm happy with that. Alright, now I model modern equipment, so I have to add the safety striping. This is a set from Smokebox Graphics, and it looks great. I've actually used these on only a couple of cars so far, but I do like them a lot. You just stick them on because they're pre-cut. You have some options for different sizes and types and colors. And then after I put them all on in place, I just burnish them down with a toothpick, as they recommend, so they don't fall off. But they seem very good products. Also, since I model modern equipment, I really have to add some graffiti because that's on basically every modern rail car, as far as I've seen. So I'm going to paint some of that now for you guys. I'm going to use these like Molotov brand artists paint pens. I bought a couple colors for this effect, and I was originally planning to just paint them on with the marker tip, but the marker tip's about 1 millimeter wide and it would be way out of scale. So instead I actually just pump the ink out onto a little surface, and then I take a very small brush and I actually apply the ink like this. I guess it's not really ink, it's more like paint, but it's very, very thin, and it's perfect, like just out of the marker to apply with a brush. It's just perfect for this kind of stuff. So I sped this up about 6 times, I think, and I just have a reference photo next to me of a graffiti on random car, and I'm just basically copying it, sort of. I'm not artistic enough to do my own tags, so I just kind of have to copy a reference photo. And I can change up a little bit, but this does take some practice. I've done this a couple times so far, and I'm getting pretty good. I have a pretty steady hand as well, so it's pretty easy for me. I also like to add these little like paint runs kind of, and make it look like there's sections where they stop their spray can for a second, so it's kind of like a blob. But I should do a video just on painting graffiti soon, because you can use these paint pens, you can also airbrush it, and you can also use watercolor pencils as well. So I should do a video just on this sometime. Here you can see there's my reference photo on my phone next to me. I just basically, well, I copy it sort of, but I often have to change it up a little bit because the subject is a little bit different. But having reference photos besides you always helps when you're painting and weathering. And there we go, that's our completed result. It took me, I think, of just a couple evenings. It was actually very quick, and it also really helps if you do it in bulk. You do a couple at once, weathering really goes by quickly. I do like my result here. I think it really well represents a modern hopper in service because it's gray, it's been patched, it's rusty, safety striping, and it's covered in graffiti. Well, not that covered, but there's some graffiti on it. We got rust in all the right spots on the lower areas here with the wheels and the trucks. And I also think that the roof walkways and the kind of repainted, replaced sections looks very interesting. So I hope you guys learned some new techniques if you're interested in this kind of stuff. And I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. They support me, and it really helps me making these videos for you guys. Also, if you want to see more model railroading stuff, let me know. I don't know how many of my viewers are actually into this stuff. I know some of them are, but I try to give you guys one of these videos every once in a while. So if you want to see more, let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.